Okay, readers. So this week we are going to work together. We're going to start studying and practicing responding to test questions, and we're going to be focusing on narrative passages. So the passages typically are going to be either fiction or historical fiction. And remember, when I say passage, what I really mean is a text, right? A text that you're asked to read. So the first thing we always want to do whenever we're looking at a text is we want to start by reading the directions and by reading the summary. Sometimes there will be a summary, sometimes there won't, but it will always give us clues as to what type of thinking work we're going to do when we start reading this text. So let's go ahead and do that together. So it says, read this story. As I'm reading here, you guys follow along, okay? It says, read this story, then answer questions 19 through 23. Okay, so I'm already going to start to gather a little bit of information. So I know it's a story, which means that it's either fiction or fantasy or historical fiction. It's something that is a story or not true. Now let's go ahead and read the summary. It says, while on vacation with his parents and digging for dinosaur fossils, Benny makes a surprising discovery. Young boys are not the only creatures who lose teeth. Okay, so Alexander, who do we know one of the characters is going to be?
Benny.
Benny, good. So we already know that in this story, one of the characters will be Benny, who's a boy on vacation with his parents, and he's in a place where there's dinosaur fossils. So he's probably not at the beach in Florida, okay? And I wonder where they're going to dig for these fossils. Like, it's probably not going to be in a city, maybe in the woods or in a desert. And it says that Benny makes a surprising discovery that has something to do with losing teeth. So now we have an idea of how the story is going to go, and we're ready to begin to read it for the first time. So when we read it through the first time, we're just going to be reading it to get the gist. I'm going to read it with expression, and I'm going to read it out loud, and you're going to follow along, okay? Reading it in your head at the same time that I'm reading it aloud. Are you ready to read it together, this story? Give me a thumbs up. All right, here we go. Digging for Dinos by Sharnan Simon. Digging for dinosaurs was hot work. Benny sat back on his heels and took a long drink from his water bottle. At first, when Mom and Dad had told him they were going on a dinosaur dig for vacation, he'd been excited. He bragged to his friends that he'd find the skeleton of a never before discovered dinosaur, the Benosaurus, they'd probably name it. But the real dig wasn't at all what he expected. For starters, he wasn't even digging. No shovels, Dave, the paleontologist in charge, told them. Any dinosaur bones buried here should be within a couple feet of the surface. We don't want to risk clunking around and breaking them. Then he'd handed out ice picks and paintbrushes and showed everyone how to chip and brush away sand and dirt slowly and carefully, a little bit at a time. The most important thing is knowing where to look, Dave said. Some rocks aren't old enough to have dinosaur bones. Other rocks are too old. We've studied this area before and found lots of fossils. So I'm hopeful you'll find some too. Well, that had been 2 days ago. And so far, the most exciting thing Benny had found was that his front tooth was loose. He wiggled it now. If he couldn't find any dinosaur bones, at least he could show his friends back home that he'd lost another tooth. Dave crouched beside Benny. How's it going? He asked. Okay, Benny said. It didn't seem very nice to say that he was bored. This is pretty slow. Dave nodded. Yep, he agreed. It's hard work. Sometimes paleontologists and fossil hunters look for weeks without finding anything, and we hardly ever find a whole skeleton. He added, you know, Ben, if you're tired of searching, you can always help someone else on the crew. Okay, so now that we've read it the first time, and I only read halfway through, you'll see on page 2 is the rest of the story. But now that we read through it the first time to get the gist of what's happening in the story, Now we're ready to go back and we're ready to read it with a question in our mind. And when we're thinking about reading a story, there's some work that we might normally do. So let me show you what some of this work is. So first of all, you might want to think about who are the characters in the story. You might also want to think about what you know about them. Like, what are you learning about them? Where is the story taking place and why does that matter? Or also you could think about like, what's the big problem so far in the story, or what's the solution in the story? So we're going to go ahead and start reading this book, this story again, this time with that in mind, and we're going to annotate as we're reading. I'm going to do this for a little bit, and then I'm going to give you guys a chance to do this. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Digging for dinosaurs was hot work. Benny sat back on his heels and took a long drink from his water bottle. At first, when Mom and Dad had told him they were going on a dinosaur dig for a vacation, he'd been excited. He bragged to his friends that he'd find the skeleton of a never before discovered dinosaur. The Benosaurus, they'd probably name it. But the real dig wasn't at all what he expected. For starters, he wasn't even digging. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So let's think about what are some of the things that we're noticing or some of the thinking that we're doing when we're reading a story. Are we ready? I'm going to choose yellow to highlight with. So it says here that he sat back on his heels and he took a long drink from his water bottle. What is that telling you about Benny? What is that telling you about Benny? Can you type in the chat what you're thinking about Benny right now? He's tired. He's hot and thirsty. I'm thinking like he definitely is not seeming like a very hard worker right now. It says digging for dinosaurs was hot work. So, okay, let me go ahead and add one of your thoughts here. So he's tired and maybe even he's tired of working. And I'm just going to add that right there. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller because I know I'm going to want to add more thoughts. Okay, let's keep reading. He bragged to his friends that he'd find the skeleton of a never before discovered dinosaur, the Benosaurus, they'd probably name it, but the real dig wasn't at all what he expected. Okay, so let's go back to our chart. I'm thinking that we could do some thinking work around the problem. What is the problem? So what I'm going to do right now, you guys, I'm going to put you in a breakout room. Listen very carefully. You're going to have 1 minute to talk with your partner, only 1 minute. And listen to this part very carefully. I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me. When you come back from talking with your partner, I'm going to call on 2 people and I'm going to have you tell me what your partner said, not what you shared, what your partner shared. So make sure when you go into the room right now that you make sure your partner tells you something so that when you come back, you're ready to share something. Does that sound good? So the question is, what is the problem so far in the story? Okay, are you ready? Okay, let me get you guys in breakout rooms and all right, 1 minute. All right, girls, go for it. So who's going to start? Let's say I think the problem in the story is Abby, you start. Go ahead and try.
So I think that the big problem so far from what we read was that it wasn't at all like he expected. Because
Camila, sweetie, take your microphone off. Okay, so I think the problem in the story is, Evelyn, you start us off, sweetie.
That he was really tired and sad that the dinosaur dig was not what he thought.
Great. Camilla, your turn.
So
Actually, no, I'm going to write it differently. He would.
Okay.
He thought it was. He thought he was going to dig quickly and easily.
Mm-hmm.
Great job, guys. I love these conversations.
But thank you.
Okay,
But
so
Hi.
Hey. Okay, so I think the problem in the story is Frank. I think the problem in the story is Axel. What do you think, bud?
I think the problem in the story is that they won't be able to find any like certain dino or like fossil.
Good. Okay, good. Okay, your turn, Frank. Romina and Gilbert, if you guys have your cameras off, you're going to have a really hard time talking to each other. So, Gilbert, your turn first. I think the problem in the story is
Benny doesn't want to work. He just wants to find the phone so he can show off to his friends.
good job. Okay. Okay, so everyone's back. So I don't know if you noticed how much of a difference it was when you guys put your video cameras on when you were in your partner room. You have your videos off while you're talking with a partner. It's really hard to have a conversation because you don't know who's going to talk first. So I really encourage you if you can, when you are in your room with your partner, turn your camera on and turn your microphones off. I mean on, so that you can talk. Okay. As soon as you did that, you guys were having awesome conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Melanie, can you start us off? Can you tell me what your partner said? What was the problem in the story?
So the problem in the story that we both decided on, that we saw in the story, was that he thought the digging would be easy, but once he started digging and digging, it was harder and even harder. That's why he got hot and tired. So that's why he had to drink almost like the whole water bottle.
Good. Okay, Gilbert, what did you say the problem in the story was?
Well, I think the problem in the story is he just wants to show off to his friends so he could be cool in school. He did think that that the work would be so hard.
Okay, so Gilbert, can you tell me, now that you're looking at my screen, can you tell me one line that you think I should highlight and that we should annotate that shows the problem of the story?
Think digging for dinosaurs was hot work.
Okay, digging for dinosaurs was hot work. That's part of the problem. What else? Let me see. Alexander, can you choose for me one piece of evidence that shows what the problem was?
It shows how Gilbert said it.
Any problem that you think, just show me a piece
Oh,
of evidence.
okay. But the real dig wasn't at all what he expected.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm definitely seeing in here the problem that you guys were talking about, which was that the dig was a lot harder. Actually, let me put here, the problem is that the dig was a lot harder than he thought. And also somebody might choose to put that it was a problem that they weren't finding anything, right? Okay, so now you've seen how I've started to annotate this story. It's going to be your turn now. So you're going to keep going. You're going to work with the rest of paragraph 2 or paragraph 3, 4, or any of this page. You're just going to work on this page for right now. Okay, so go ahead and go into your other tab. I'm going to be looking at your assignment from here, and I will be able to see your work as you're doing it. Go ahead and begin now reading and thinking about what is some of the thinking work I can do. You can highlight or you can write sticky notes. Go ahead and begin now.
It's supposed to be a Jamboard where you can see everybody's annotations or just your own?
Just yours. It's just yours. Yep.
Okay.
So Jacqueline. So I see that you underlined Benny sat back on his heels and took a long drink. So that was the one that we worked on earlier. So let's skip down to paragraph 3. Look at paragraph 3. Okay. So Isaiah, I see that you're highlighting like kind of feelings, like he's hopeful, he's bored. Go ahead and add a sticky note that shows what that's telling you about him. And Romina, so I see that you highlighted, sometimes paleontologists and fossil hunters look for weeks without finding anything. So go ahead and add, is that adding to the problem? And if so, what is it? What is that telling you about what you're reading? Camilla, you highlighted the most important thing is knowing where to look. So what is that telling you? Add a sticky note. Anaï, let's start working, sweetie. Jonathan, you're doing a great job, buddy. So you said, so Dave is a good person because he's helping Benny and his family. Well, Benny is not happy much, so that tells me that Benny's not a patient person. Good. How about the problem now? What can we find about the problem or the setting? What is the story telling us about the setting? Okay, so Evelyn, I see you put the dinosaur dig was not what he thought. It wasn't what he was expecting it to be, right? He bragged that he was going to search for dinosaur bones. Frank, I see that you've highlighted some evidence, so add a sticky note with your idea about that. So Gilbert, you put David loves dinosaurs and won't stop until he finds a fossil. So what's the evidence? Oh, okay, Dave, yes, not Benny. You're right. So Dave, because he loves dinosaurs, that's what makes him, that helps him to be patient, right? Alexander, I agree. I was thinking the same thing, that he's a positive, that Dave is really a positive person. If you finish that page, you can go on to the next page as well. Abigail, you wrote that Dave is a paleontologist that knows a lot about dino fossils. Okay, you guys, go ahead and come back to Zoom. And once you are back, give me a thumbs up that you can see me. Okay, readers. So the important thing is that we've started reading the text. We've done some thinking work around it. And now we're ready to answer some multiple choice questions that the test makers are going to ask you, or things that they think are important. Okay, so we're going to try one together. And remember, when we do this, we're looking for the best answer. Sometimes there's more than one answer that makes sense, but we are looking for the best answer. So let's go ahead and do one of these questions together. So let me just bring this to the front. All right, it says, based on paragraphs 2 and 7, a paleontologist is a person who mainly, now we have 4 possible answers, and we're going to look at these 4 answers, and let's find first the 2 answers that we know are wrong. Okay, there's typically one that's obviously wrong, like we say that's an ow answer, like ow, that's like really wrong, okay? And then there's a wrong answer, and then there's 2 that sometimes will feel right. So let's look. So a paleontologist is a person who mainly A, digs deep in the ground, B, studies ancient animal bones, C, leads a big team, or D, finds complete animal skeletons? Okay, so what is the answer that we know is wrong, completely wrong? Can you,
Literally.
I
which
think
one? You can just type A, B, C, or D. So I am agreeing with some of what you guys are saying, and I think that C is obviously wrong because you don't necessarily have to have a big team in order to do that. Okay, so now let's look, which one do we think is also wrong? Digs deep in the ground, studies ancient animal bones, finds complete animal skeletons. Let's go right to here where it says no shovels. Dave, the paleontologist in charge, told them any dinosaur bones buried here should be within a couple feet of the surface. We don't want to risk clunking around and breaking them. So which one of those do you think is wrong based off what I just read? Some of you put, I see a lot of you putting A and a lot of you putting D. So yeah, from that section, based off paragraphs 2 and 7, we know that they're not digging deep in the ground. Let's read paragraph 7 now, because it's telling us to read in paragraph 2 and paragraph 7. So let's read paragraph 7. Dave nodded. Yep, he agreed. It's hard work. Sometimes paleontologists and fossil hunters look for weeks without finding anything. And we hardly ever find a whole skeleton, he added. You know, Ben, if you're tired of searching, you can always help someone else on the crew. So what's the other one that's wrong based on paragraph 7? And many of you already put it, and that is D. Because it says right here, we hardly ever find a whole skeleton. So we know that our correct answer is B, studies ancient animal bones. So I know that this work is hard work. Okay, let's be honest. It's not easy. It's hard because you have to focus for a long time. You have to think about what you're reading. You have to be willing to read something more than one time. You have to be willing to slow yourself down and annotate what you're reading, and then take your time really figuring out what questions you need to answer and what the right answers are. So we're just starting this work. Ms. Robles is going to be continuing this work with you, and I know it's going to get easier and easier as you go along because you'll know what the expectations are. Okay. All right, you guys, thanks for letting me work with you today.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez.